It is late August in 2012, and Chad and I are in Columbia, South Carolina. And there's a guy that was definitely not born in South Carolina. He was born in Michigan. In fact, he played for a team in Michigan, the Detroit Tigers. And tonight, asking a few questions from none other than well-known relief pitcher of the Houston Astros and Detroit Tigers, Fred Gladden. Fred, number one, how are you doing?
Well, I'm above the ground, hanging in there. Not too good.
You know, a kid growing up in Detroit, when you were a youngster in grade school and high school, the obvious question is, was the Tigers your team? I mean, were you a diehard Tiger fan growing up?
Oh yeah, that's all I thought about. And the favorite pitcher I wanted was Dizzy Trout.
Oh, Dizzy Trout. No
That's
kidding.
who was my favorite pitcher. Had the red bandana, and when I was in the minor leagues, I used to have the red bandana
Did you really?
in my pants all the time too, to clean my glasses off.
Now, Dizzy Trout, obviously following in baseball tradition, Dizzy Trout has a son. And during your time of coaching, it's a little odd, but then you got to see his son pitch.
Yeah.
Because Steve Trout ended up being a big league pitcher too.
Yes, I did.
When you were in high school, I guess the biggest question is, did you get looked at by a bird dog? Did you go to college? Did they see you play Legion ball? Somebody had to see you to see this guy's got potential. So my question is, how did you get discovered?
Well, I went to a tryout camp my junior year. A friend and I went to a tryout camp the Tigers were having. We went there and they looked at us, you know, and we pitched. And, well, I pitched in the ball game. He was an outfielder. And they wanted to sign me right away. I told them, I said, well, I'm only a junior. They said, you're not supposed to be here. I said, I know it, but I just wanted to see what it was like. And the next year I had a scout follow me every ball game when I was the same guy that signed me.
So, were you a senior in high school, a teenager, and you were signing a major league contract to eventually leave home shortly after graduation?
Well, I was supposed to, but I wouldn't go. I said, I'll stay home. I was playing on a team with a semi-pro team that was mostly all pro ball players, ex-pro ball players playing on it. We were playing, and I pitched all the time. And Jim Lomberg, he was gonna come and pitch with us, and he told me later on, he said, I went there and watched you pitch, and he said, well, I ain't gonna pitch there with him pitching there. So he said, I went to another team and played.
Too funny. Well, you had to, you actually came along at the end of these things called D-ball, C-ball, going through and what is now known as A, AA, AAA. So did you make your steps through the towns in the minor leagues to get to the big leagues?
Yes, I started out in D-ball. I played my first year in D-ball, Valdosta, Georgia, and ended up, I had a winning record in Valdosta, Georgia, and ended up going back there and playing another year, and ended up winning 18 ball games the next year in that same league. And then the next year I started out in AAA ball, and then they sent me to AA, and then I went to A ball, and that's when I ended up in Knoxville.
Man, oh man. Did something happen 52 years ago in Knoxville that has nothing to do with baseball?
Yeah, I met my wife there.
Well, baseball has a high divorce rate. Something must have gone right with the Gladden residence because it's 52 years later.
Well, my dad always said if I'd have stayed home all the time, she'd have divorced me by then. But I was gone all the time, so she didn't have to worry about me.
I have to make mention of a phone call because when we're in Houston, we're going to play this clip. And we were chatting back and forth, Fred and I. And Fred said, I had a pitching coach that was very, very good. I had a guy named Johnny Sane. So Fred, when he was done with his career, ended up being a pitching coach to Mark the Bird Fidrich. He ended up being a pitching coach to a guy that threw a no-hitter, Darryl Kyle. So then Johnny Sane has passed on, and sadly Mark the Bird Fidrich and Darryl Kyle have passed on. But a name came up, and it's this nickname called Bear. He started off pitching for the Phillies, and then the Astros. Then he became a pitching coach. Fred, could you tell us a little bit about who you just got off the phone with?
Well, we just got through talking with Jim Owens, the Bear, and that. And he was a guy who knew more about pitching. I learned a lot. When I went there, I asked him about every guy in the league, hitters, and he told me how he thought I could pitch him and everything, and he was right. And he knew a lot about what he's doing. And he was a lot of fun. I really had an enjoyable years with him.
Who was he playing golf with, and whose name came up just this week?
Owen said he was playing with Larry Durker, and that played golf with Larry Durker.
And who were they talking about on the golf course?
He said, well, he said, your name was brought up, and a few other guys. He said, you know, we had a bunch of crazy guys on that ball club.
That's too funny. I say to you, you were a reliever in the National League. You were a reliever in the American League. So you have your Detroit Tigers experience. You have your Houston Astros experience. They definitely say the pitching is different in both leagues. So the biggest question is, how did you adapt? Because you had success in both leagues. You had to change something up to be successful, didn't you?
Well, I was a low ball pitcher, and I was better off in the National League because they gave you the low strike in the National League. The umpires in the American League used to have that big blown, and they'd look over, peek over, and they never could see the low pitch. They'd give you the high pitch, but they'd never give you the low pitch. So it was much easier for me to pitch in the National League.
It was. The obvious question is, you also got to see all the hitters in both leagues, and you're the main relief guy. So who really, while you sat there the first 6 innings and the starter's doing his job, you got to see Mantle versus Mays. You got to see, I could go on and on and on. Who really, really impressed you while you would sit there for the first 6 innings, watching the starters and the hitters in both leagues? But what hitters absolutely stood out among the rest?
Well, all your good hitters. But always remember, I always wanted your good hitters to have 2 or 3 hits by the time I come in the game. The odds were with me then that they weren't going to get a hit. But if they were 0 for 4, now I'm in trouble. They got a chance to get a hit.
With you saying that you were a low ball pitcher, right?
Yeah.
Were you coming over the top, twisting your hand like this? Were you coming 3/4? What was your way?
I was a sinker ball pitcher. Threw hard and sunk the ball all the time. Run the ball in on right-hand hitters, and I threw a slider. Once in a great while, I'd throw a slider and everything. And probably the only time I really thought about throwing a slider was one night I was in Houston. We were playing San Diego, and bases loaded, and Colbert, the big first baseman, was up, and he had fouled off about 10 pitches. And Johnny Edwards is the catcher, and he put down a slider, 3-2. And I said, well, if you got enough guts to call it, I got enough guts to throw it. And I threw it. It broke right down the middle, and the guy just stood there and watched it go by. Then later on the next day, he said, I never believed seeing you throw a slider to me at that situation.
Here's a good story that you shared, and now that the kid has got the camera rolling. You were a ball player, and you have this roommate named Jack. Later on in your life, manager says to the pitching coach is Fred Gladden, hey Fred, what do you think about getting this guy named Jack? Would you share that story? Because that's a good one.
Well, we was in spring training, and Ralph Houck was the manager, and he called me in the office, and he said, we have a chance to make a trade. And then I said, you do? And he said, yeah, we got a couple of young pitchers that they'd like, and we want to get this older guy. I said, well, who is it? He said, Jack Billingham. I said, trade and get him. I said, he's a first-class person. And I said, he'll give you everything he's got. And we made the trade, and he come over there. About 11 o'clock, he walked in the clubhouse. He dropped his bag, and he looked at me, and he said, well, I roomed with you for a bunch of years. Now you're my boss. I can't believe this.
If you talk to the guys in the 1940s, they would think, right, the guys in the 1960s, my gosh, you guys are making more money, this, and this, and the game has changed. Anytime you talk about one generation versus the new generation, it's so easy to have opinions or whatnot. With the game now, it's 2012. You stayed in the game. You get it. There's changes because you became a pitching coach. So when you're at home with your wife, Margie, what players or what teams or who do you enjoy looking at now?
I generally watch the Braves all the time because they're on here every night. So that's what I watch, the Braves and everything. And I just watch these guys pitch, and they just, to me, they make the game hard now. They don't want to throw the ball over the plate. You know, they're afraid the ball being hit. And you've got to throw strikes and get people out. That's the only way you're going to do it. If that's the way I graded pitchers, if he got people out in the strike zone, I knew he was going to win. But then he didn't throw strikes, because them guys, after a while, would just start taking and he'd be walking the ballpark.
Then the easiest final question is, you got to ask it of a relief pitcher. You spent a long time in the game, Gladdy. If you're a manager of an expansion team, just teammates, I'm only asking teammates, what 2 or 3 starting pitchers, all those years in the game, all the Tigers, all the Astros, which 2 or 3 pitchers are you picking as a manager now of guys that you played with, that these are my pitchers? No one knows them better than you. Pick 2 or 3, anyone you want.
Well, I'd have to pick Fidrich as number one of my guys, and Darryl Kyle, and Durker was a good pitcher. And in Detroit, it was probably as a reliever, John Hiller.
Sure.
John Hiller is a reliever, and there's a few others, and that it's hard to just sit down and say, because hey, the game's changed now,
You bet.
and you don't realize it, and you know, they got to make the moves in that. And Wilson had one of the greatest arms I ever seen. Don Wilson in Houston, he was just unbelievable. He could throw the ball by anybody. So.
And in closing, for the kids that might Google this, there was once a pitcher that was different from the rest, and he would do these antics of fixing the mound, fixing the dirt, talking to the baseball. And it was very, very cool for us tonight to hear firsthand that this young kid was going to face the unbelievable New York Yankees on Monday Night Baseball. Can you share anything about Fidrich, you listening to Fidrich talk about not letting Jackson, but what happened in New York, Monday Night Baseball, changed everything. Cover of Sports Illustrated, cover of the Sporting News. You know, he was a phenomenon, and you were there to see it. But what happened one Monday night? Which team won? How did that game go?
Well, before the game, we was getting ready for the ball game, and Reggie was getting on Fidrich, telling him he was going to hit him in the upper deck in right field. And Fidrich was hollering back. He said, "We'll see who's going to do it." And he turned around as Jackson walked away and left. And he said, "It comes down to winning the ball game. He ain't going to even get a chance to hit because I'm going to walk him."
And Fidrich beat the Yankees.
Yeah, he beat him 4-0, shut him out. He just, we got the runs in about the 7th inning, and he turned around and he looked at me and he said, "Ball game's over."
You gotta love it. This was a great day, a great night in Columbia, South Carolina. Folks, before the glory, listening to him tell stories, it doesn't get any better than listening to Fred Gladden. Fred, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate you taking a few minutes with us.